Give you guys a midday update here with John Stallman.
Aloha.
You want to say hi?
Hi.
Yeah, we're down here at the hub. We're open today here at Pu'uhonua, Puna. Get our usual supplies for evacuees. Numbers coming through, people coming through here. We are going to give you guys a little midday update here and catch up a little more as long as Brother John's got time. And we'll go into is what we know right now, which is, we can have some discussions as well. So thanks you guys for joining. Maybe a couple of things about the hub real quick. The hub's open here today. We've talked to a few people already this morning, and we've kind of I can personally say that I'm happy that I've been here because it seems like people are still having a big need for information in person, and there are a lot of things changing that make them uncomfortable. Some of the things that have come up is that people just need a space for to talk and have some more connection to people and not be so isolated. People just need the support, whether it's in companionship or emotionally, but of being here and talking story with us. That's going to come up as well. We have heard that there are people who are now paying rent at places they relocated to when it didn't have to pay rent before because they own their houses, and we only had a couple payments a year of things that they actually had to spend. So they spend a lot of the money on rent now. So the hub is here to serve people in the other ways, other supplies maybe they don't need to buy. So that's a way that kind of helps with that financial crunch a tiny bit, right? To get some of your household supplies, you can put your money, most of it, towards rent probably. And hopefully that's a short-term thing. Everyone's, I suppose, still frustrated at the lack of access to get to even where their property was burned down or covered, or or not covered, or whatever else. We're hearing a lot of that as well from people here at the hub. So the situation is still very fluid for a lot of people who have been displaced, and people are trying to either get settled or resettle or solve problems that the resettlement has caused them, kind of make the whole thing work as a whole cohesive unit with money coming in, going out, getting the supplies they need to either repair or re-access their house, and not having funds for that. And people are having issues with their insurance still, and they're having issues with FEMA denials still, and they're having issues with the fact that temporary housing is supposed to be temporary, and it's actually been 60 days already since the first people have moved in there. So there are people who are having to rotate out of temporary housing. We'll have to find out more about that and let you guys know. It may have to do with the neighborhoods affected and where people are from or what they're doing in there. I'm not really sure, but there's fluidity there as well. Basically, is what I'm trying to get at. So I think everyone is still trying to get some kind of normalcy, whether that means settling in permanently somewhere else where they've moved to, even if they've kind of, chosen to resettle somewhere different, they still have to, that's still a long process to do that, right? So there's a lot of that all still happening here in the background, kind of behind all the updates. We're talking about the geology a lot of the time, but there's all this other social happenings as well happening here. So I just wanted to mention that and kind of just point out to everybody that's still going on. There's still a lot of people that could use help. There's still the issue of housing for a lot of people. People are some people are in more permanent positions, but others are in areas where their housing really is temporary and they need to relocate every month or a couple months, and they're hoping to just kind of either do that so they can get back in their house or find something that actually fits their budget, which usually is not very much. So that's, I think, what I've observed about the social situation. You want to add anything, John?
Yeah, I mean, our geologic situation is complex enough, but then how does everybody relate to these issues in their own particular situation is even more complex. So for a lot of people, the eruption is effectively over right now. You know, we're still looking for signs and things like that, but it's like the air is clear, there is no lava they want back in their houses. For some people who might not even be very far away from them, they're still under the gas cloud from Fissure 8, or they're still living on steaming cracks that are shifting and moving right through their own property. So everybody's got a very different situation, and it doesn't always fit the protocols for how society is dealing with these things, FEMA, insurance, and just it's important to recognize how different every single person's situation is at this time, where we're trying to take this recovery stroke while it's all paused or possibly completely over. And so yeah, it's just super complex, and you gotta remember all of our neighbors in this situation. Everybody's experience right now is really, really different, and a lot of people are in really difficult, frustrating situations even still.
Right. If you're stuck now, you've probably been stuck for a while, and you're still stuck, and it's really frustrating.
Right, and so some people are still experiencing the geologic effects of this eruption. Even though it's paused, it's settling down, we're not getting signals that it's going to restart, but some people are still dealing with all sorts of that, the issues, the gases, the cracks, the steam vents. And so it's nice being here at the hub. You get feedback on those issues, to hear people's stories. It helps get the big picture.
Yeah, helps us keep perspective too. Yeah, so that's one big benefit to us, and something I want to share with you guys there. So I think we can't really ignore the big issue that everyone is talking about, which is wanting to get back. You have the cross section of people who are wanting to go back to their houses, you know, and are not able to do so, and are growing in concern about, you know, what's going to happen, what the path forward is, because there's not been a whole lot of transparency of what any agency's plans actually are. Maybe they don't have a plan, but if they do have a plan, then no one knows what it is. The actual budget that was released earlier this week, I believe, seems to hint at the existence of some kind of plan, because there's a bunch of numbers of money being thrown around in there. So you know, a lot of us would like to know what that actually is in detail, right? One spreadsheet with a, you know, big number with millions after it, you know, without being subdivided into all the different expenses is a little hazy with how that actually gets spent or what it's exactly for. So I think a lot of us, our citizens, are concerned that there is not a whole lot of transparency there, you know, not a lot of detail of what's going on, of plans, or even input from the community, you know, which means it would actually mean telling the community what your plan was and trying to get some feedback. So we've not even gotten the first step of that yet. So there's all those various issues happening. You know, of course, we're hearing some people really want to go back in and check things out. You know, I think it's probably still a changing situation, right? Because it seems like it's geologically a great time to go and check things out, but we still have not, as of the moment of this broadcast, heard any change in attitude from civil defense as far as access or DLNR or anything like that. The important thing that we've been talking about this morning, we've been focusing on, that has happened, is that the USGS has lowered their alert level from a warning to a watch. And that's, to me, a hugely significant step forward, because they don't issue these volcanic alert notices very often. Something quite dramatic's going to happen. So, you know, I believe the last one we might have had could actually have been back in, you know, May 3rd maybe, when the eruption began in Leilani. You know, I gotta go back through and look at that again. But that's like, you know, all the daily reports, everything they put out on social media, none of that stuff enters a federal record, really. It obviously is a record. You know, a social media record is a little newer, maybe a little more hazy how that gets stored. You know, obviously all the daily reports are stored, you know, internally and online and available through the searches and all that, so it's all public information, but it doesn't actually affect, like, you know, it's not like a federal stamp, which essentially is how I view this thing, right? It's like, you know, almost like a stamp, and I say that, you know, it's kind of, you know, made an announcement. So to me that implies a couple of things, you know. First, you know, geologically, is that they must have crossed some threshold where they feel the eruption may have actually entered a pause. When we look back at this in like 50 years and look at what actually is written on paper, the date today, which is the 17th of August, is the day it's going to go down on a record that this VAN came out that dropped the activity level from warning to watch. So this data is actually going to be significant in the long term just for that, regardless of the changes we've been seeing happening over a whole month now, showing decreases in eruption, right? So there's that. So that's the first part of it, and the second part of it is that I personally feel, I don't have any inside information or anything like that, but the way that all the different agencies have described how their responses react is all kind of a domino effect. And it seems that quite often the USGS is one of the first dominoes that's got to fall for other things to happen. So the fact that the USGS has made this declaration, to me, is like the first domino falling. So, any other agency, like for example, Civil Defense, can't say, well, we're waiting for the USGS to say something has changed, because now they have said something has changed. And now it's the turn of the Civil Defense or whoever else, depending on what particular topic we're talking about, to kind of mobilize, we've heard even the National Park talk about their trigger points, right? And that is got to be one of them. I don't see how it cannot be. It's a very significant milestone. So that kind of means that they can also be spurred into some different actions now that is a formal announcement made in a federal record. So that's like my take on that. Let me turn it to John for.
Oh yeah, just gotta emphasize that that's the way the picture is set up. Everybody kind of relies on USGS's assessment of the risk, and they've said yes, today the risk is lower. We're lowering the hazard warning to volcano watch rather than volcano warning, and this is super important because it's acknowledging there's less hazard. Even if it starts up again right now, we don't have any sign of that, so it's less dangerous than it was before. And all the other agencies, now that USGS has said the official word on that, they're kind of obligated to react to that new reality as USGS defines it. So that's just the way the picture's set up. And then in their update, they already have a few times given extra discussion about, even though it's paused or there's not lava coming out, there's still hazards out there. And they kind of did that extensively with the update today. So if you want to check that out online, the daily update has all these remarks about the hazards that are out there. And a lot of them Philip and I talked about. Pele's hair blowing around, earth moving if you're near the fissures. Other important ones that kind of relate back to social experience right now is the coastline. The new coastline that's created might end up being unstable, and so they warn that there could be collapses and explosions when pieces slough off and there's hot rock still inside all of that huge amount of material at Kapoho.
Yeah, the coast especially, but even the channel might have settling and collapsing.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the channel's still very dangerous and the coast is very dangerous, and I'm just pointing that out because it's important for the picture that USGS paints for the other agencies like Civil Defense. They've lowered the overall alert level. We're now at watch instead of warning, but they're still saying, hey, the coast is probably really dangerous. Hey, the channel is probably still super dangerous. And so the USGS kind of has the say in how to outline what the danger is, and Civil Defense and the other agencies react to that. And so if you want to understand the picture that the geologists are painting for the other agencies to go by, it's all in that update. And it means a lot of things. So I don't know if this is the right time, but we talked to one of our friends that I've met early on in the eruption getting to Kapoho. And obviously...
It's all noisy, just make sure you speak up.
Sorry, that's not the volcano, it's just a motorcycle. So obviously people who live in Kapoho don't have a home to go back to at this time. There's essentially no structures left. But so it's irritating, at least for this person, to see people out on the new beach at Kapoho when residents who lived there aren't allowed to go there, And so those are kind of like these things that it's frustrating for residents who were affected or lost everything in this disaster to not be able to have access that people are getting to go out and check out the new beaches and stuff. And I'm bringing that up because, the USGS assessment is that those beaches probably aren't that safe. And so I don't really see Civil Defense allowing people to go there anytime soon, and these are examples of the issues that will have to be worked out over time now. Even if the eruption stays paused or stays totally POW, Those are the types of issues that still have to trickle down of where are we allowed to go, what is officially safe now about the new land that's been created, and so that has yet to be seen as well.
Yeah, so we're gonna get a little guest commentary from Sherry here. Let me turn the camera around just because we're having issues with the microphone. So
Okay. Hi. I was at the shelter for a while. Now I got my own place, and I just asked for some information about accurate number of people who went into temporary situations, whether it's their own land or friends, and there is no accurate count of that, and that should be the main focus if this eruption is over, so that people can move on, either do the land swap or figure out the next step of how to rebuild Pahoa and Lower Puna.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. Yeah, we always like to hear from as many voices as possible. So thank you for sharing your mana'o with us. There have been plenty of changes on the ground, that are occurring. Mostly we're seeing a lot of gas coming out still. We're seeing the ground cracks moving, we know that at least some people are still dealing with the effects of the eruption. Even as the lava isn't coming out, the ground is still settling and still rocking houses, off of their foundations kind of thing, there's still a lot going on that we're waiting to see, but really our concern right now really should be with the people who have been displaced the longest and were in the shelters and now are out of the shelters or back in the shelters or in some temporary housing, or some temporary permanent housing, and just trying to figure it out, and
maybe we should speak a little bit more to the earth cracking, because some people are still very worried that now that we're not seeing the lava coming out into the channel, that pressure is building up and it's going to erupt somewhere else, especially since, USGS on Tuesday reported some of the cracks they've measured in West Leilani were still 400 degrees. That's hot, like oven hot. And it's important to understand that geologically we don't have any indication of pressure building. We don't have any indication of it inflating and getting ready to start again. So when we see reports of ground moving, cracking, gases escaping, that's all natural stuff that we can expect, even if it's continuing to deflate and settle. And we currently don't have warning signs that are suggesting it's about to reactivate. It could, USGS says that very clearly, it could still reactivate, but that's not the kind of signs we're having. So people who might be near the fissures, say, or in Leilani that are hearing about this, just understand that although there's still ground movement and things like that, we don't have the signals that it's going to reactivate at this time. It could, but we're just not seeing that. So any of the ground movement can be explained as part of settling, basically. So important to know.
Right. And I just want to maybe just revisit something that you brought up about the beach access. I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit here, but no big deal. Mm-hmm. Everyone's interested in everything we have to say, so it's all good. Mm-hmm. But the thing about I just wanted to add something about the beach access is that, there's been movement socially as well for people to try to regain access to their homes as like the first priority. Mm-hmm. And even here in talks of Pu'uhonua, the things that Pu'uhonua is trying to actually put their efforts and money towards are going to be, getting people back into their houses, there's a lot of talk of people wanting to go and see all the new beaches and, the lagoon and the warm pond and, go surf, all that kind of stuff. But, just so everyone, realizes, where we're coming from, none of that is as important as people getting back to their houses first, right? Securing their houses first and trying to get that aspect of it back, security of their house. We want to let people go gallivanting down to the beach past houses that are not being guarded or possibly getting vandalized or looted kind of thing. That's a huge fear people have who are, maybe have left their house and don't feel it's safe to go back yet or not able to go back yet because of some condition or limitation they have, I kind of, just to reemphasize what John said, I would like to urge people to be really, really considerate of the people who are in that situation, and people who are going down there and, experiencing, I totally understand why people will have that drive to do that. But in doing so, you're really creating more trauma for the people who were forced to leave and lost everything there and can't even go back to look yet. There's no official way to go back in there, and that's extremely frustrating, right? Why should someone else?
They just want to take a look.
It's part of that accepting the reality, like kind of processing it, that whole this, we've not mentioned it in a few weeks, but the whole idea of a lava viewing area that we've been talked about for, several of those months, was so people could actually go and get some kind of closure and, have some process to kind of understand what's happened and the scale of it and the scope of it, and, like how unique an event this actually is and how historic and, how it punctuates, all those things, that requires the actual sense of sight or sense of smell while you're there, or the sense of touch to feel like, how hot and sharp that rock's still, all those senses, to hear the cracking, it's like all those things are important experiences people need to have to process this in these subconscious ways that maybe, are not written down somewhere. This is the way it should go, so that's hugely important also. And, and that clearly that whole idea has not gotten very far very fast, the idea of a viewing area, of a chance of anyone to go somewhere and see that kind of thing, so we have seen that there's been a change in the plans in the county from having a viewing area to a visitor center as it's described in the budget. It's not clear if that's just a change in the words they're using for the budget, or if it's like a change in their actual plan or attitude or goal or what, but we're very curious to see how that's going to develop, because that is still a persistent need for the community, even though the lava has stopped flowing. I think long-term, not just for people, but, long-term for tourism as well. You're going to have somewhere they can see the cooled black rock, or not so cooled black rock. The Hawaii Volcanoes National Park was hugely popular way before there was a lava lake at the summit, right? And way before there was any lava to see pretty much anywhere. Right, there are lots of years people came in, and were able to see these past eruptions and see the cold rock, and people, come and they see that first lava flow and step out onto it and walk on it. Even if it's 50 years old, it's still like a hugely impactful, meaningful experience for people. And for it to have been in this spot that's all tied up with all this social impact as well, it just makes it even more powerful. So that, the need for that spot for people to interact with the flow, even if it is just the rock itself, is still huge. And I kind of would, suggest anyone who's watching it has any, skin in that game to, keep pushing with it, because that's still something we need, and maybe it makes it easier, the fact that lava's not there anymore now, that the gases are down, right? We don't have to worry about the gas hazard quite as much. We don't have to worry about the thing breaching and spilling over quite as much, It should be easier than before now, right? And, to me, it doesn't have to be like a covered area, museum style thing, maybe by visitor center, I just mean like a platform and some bathrooms, which, bathrooms are an important issue when you have so many people coming through. And so that's, I kind of feel like that, what I wanted to say about the beaches and access and all that, there should be a place where people can actually do that, where it's not a spot where like, well, how come you get to go there and I can't? And, we do expect something to change, maybe foolishly expect something to change with the access now that the USGS has actually changed their official alert level. But we'll see, I don't see why, I don't know, I have maybe foolishly some faith that will actually happen. But, until it doesn't happen for some time, then we'll talk about that at the time. But, right now there hasn't been enough time to react. So I kind of feel like the ball is rolling still on that situation. So, sorry to go off on that little soapbox there, but, I think it's important that, everyone realizes the most important people at this point is not you going to want to go surf your beach, even if you're the best surfer in the world. I'm sorry. It's about the people whose houses you got to pass on the way there, or whose houses were there, who you would have passed, that are not there anymore, who haven't had a chance to do any of that. So that's, that social part of it there. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest question still pending now is what's going to happen as far as people's access to go and see or examine or whatever, deal with, have that physical dealing with it, right, rather than just the mental dealing with it, right? So that's the kind of where we are with that, I think. Speaking of these kind of issues, we had an alert last night from Civil Defense saying that that was going to be their last alert, that they're done giving out alerts. So for better or worse, you know, they didn't really give us a huge amount of information anyways, so maybe it's, you know, just one less interruption in your day when an alert's coming at 6 in the morning or what have you, and 4 in the afternoon, you know. So we're not sure what that really means, but that does show some change in Civil Defense's stance as well. We'll see what that actually, how that actually cascades into any further action or not. That actually came before the USGS announcement this morning. It was last night that Civil Defense made their announcement. Things are definitely changing as far as the organizations as well. We're kind of just waiting to see how that moves, how those slow-moving creatures, social behemoths, you know, actually try to tack to a new direction. And you know,
they have to react differently when USGS is making the official reaction to the volcano. The situation has officially changed because USGS says that. So it's almost like they have to adjust now.
Yeah.
So it's an important point.
Yeah, and this morning, now that we actually have, you know that what USGS did that with the alert level, you know, maybe makes the Civil Defense move yesterday not as shocking as maybe I was more shocked yesterday in the afternoon when it happened, you know, but maybe Civil Defense heard USGS was going to do this already last night and did their thing preemptively, kind of thing, you know. So those may actually be linked events, and it's hard to say how that actually works between organizations, especially in the government. So that's just one more component of that. Am I missing anything, John, that comes to mind? We're trying to be a little extra thorough today with you guys.
Talk more about the science.
Yeah, we got
it's time for that.
For sure, get to the science. Yeah, should we turn to science now? Okay, well, hold on. Someone's asking about Hurricane Lane. So Hurricane Lane is expected, last I saw, to move past south of us. And probably the biggest effect we're going to have is like the last one. The storm surge is going to move a bunch of sand around again, so we may actually see a bunch of sand movement down at Pohuiki is what we're all watching, but along the whole coastline, in fact, up and down, we might see that sand moving around a lot. It could be that destabilizes the coastal areas more. We might have more of those kind of coastal sagging or collapsing if you have some crack opening up and hot lava in there still, because it's all still, you know, our jelly sandwich, donut, maybe, I've been calling it a sandwich because like the edge has been so wide recently.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Give me a small, you know, mid-eruption adjustment there in our analogy.
But I get it.
But yeah, so you know, if you can like crack that open and you can put a giant wave in there, you can cause a little explosion as well. So that's something to be aware of as well. You know, we're not concerned as much about the boat operators anymore because, you know, we think that was a fairly self-regulating lesson that occurred. And it'd be hard for anyone to get that close again with the new regulations there are with the hurricane. So I'm not as worried about that. Plus, you probably wouldn't even out there in those waters anyway, so it's not that big a deal. So as far as a hurricane, that's all that we know right now, and until we see any sign of that thing moving any closer north towards us, we're just gonna have to keep an eye on it, as we always do, and hopefully watch it just scoot right by us to the south as usual. So that's probably all we need to talk about as far as a hurricane goes. Maybe we could switch to the pictures since we're talking about the sand now. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure, yeah.
And we have a few pictures to show you guys. Many of these are by Scott Wilson of Aloha Skies Aviation. I saw Scott was watching. Hi, thanks for joining us, Scott, and thank you once again for your fabulous contributions. So this photograph is the most recent one from today, this morning, and this is showing the area of Pohuiki. So the ocean entry of Ahalanui, actually farther over, kind of, you know, was more in here, maybe kind of possibly even off the photograph, but you guys see only a couple little wisps of fume coming up, you know, showing how much less flow there actually is. Probably not, no actually lava moving there, it's probably still hot and it's fuming from the cooling of it and the water helping cool it off as well. So that's the first one. This different view here actually kind of see a similar pattern. You know, those kind of several spots of fume and a flow field at the coast. There's a nice line here, which looks like the lava tube, the path of the lava tube perhaps. So, you know, line of fume kind of moving upslope. Yeah, nothing on a Pohoiki side of things over here. And I believe somewhere, well, we'll get to close-ups of Pohoiki. No, hold on. Let me go back to the close-ups of Pohoiki, which are not there. They're actually on a USGS website that I had in another tab over here. So let me just switch this around for you guys and show you guys. Okay, so here we are on a USGS Volcanoes multimedia site, and under the listings for today, there's a picture of Pohoiki in there. This is the one I'm going to show you guys. So you guys can kind of see a closer up view, looking from a boat ramp out towards the bay of how much sand is accumulating there. So we're seeing a lot more sand kind of moving from this area towards an area back in here. And you might expect that surge could push sand kind of closer into the back of the bay, you know, actual most, what you call it, the cusp of the bay or whatever, you know, like the most, all the way into the cove, and possibly take it away from the area up in here. This area in here has actually been thinning, right, as this area down here thickens. So depending on how much sand we have, we might actually push more sand in here, put more over here. We could move some of the sand out of here that way. It's, you know, it's no man's, you know, I mean, I don't know exactly what to think, how it's going to affect in there, but I believe the storm surge is, you know, in the teens to 20 feet range, you know, so there's going to be a lot of water movement and a lot of sand movement down there, and the amount of sand that's under the water there that no one can, most of we can't see, is much bigger than most of us imagine. So there's going to be a lot of sand moving for a long time still in that area. Yeah, years exactly. Yeah. And this is HVO's photograph of the Halanui entry area, so you guys can see there is a little bit more fume over there, and there's still red lava for the tour boats to see, and draining an area closer to Halanui, just not as much closer to Pohoiki. So there is that. While we are on the USGS page, here is a photograph of Fissure 8. I'm sorry, not the Fissure 8 channel. So the channel is just the Fissure 8 probably be up that way, right? Going over that way. And this is kind of that wider bend in a channel area, it looks like. And what they're reporting here is that the levee on the far left, this area over here, is now about 26 feet above the surface of the formerly active lava, and of course this has got some thickness. You know, it's hard to say how much, but you know, you can imagine that it's going to be, you know, at least 30 feet, if not 40 feet deep channel in an area like this is what they're actually measuring. So that's interesting. We've been talking about that for a while as well, the depth of the channels and how much lava is actually filling in there and how that implies changes in flow rates and all of that. So, you know, that's just one more piece to that story we've been telling you guys. So yeah, maybe let me go back to the pictures that Scott gave us, which are there. So here's a view looking kind of from Kapoho. The ocean is just down here, right? So this is the northern edge of the flow. There is Kapoho. The flow first came around this way into Kapoho, then it kind of switched and went this way to Halanui and Pohoiki. So we're looking towards the west, Fissure rates back up in that direction up there. Right, and what you guys can kind of see is there is nothing red anywhere. I know maybe it's not as easy to see in the daytime, but everything is basically crusted over the whole channel, and you don't even see any cracks or fuming or anything like that. So there is that's what it looks like right there. This is a view that Scott provided of the ocean entry yesterday, just so you guys can kind of get an idea of how it's changed. So it was a little bit more gas yesterday, and you know, in the area over here especially, it was a little bit over here still, but you see from then to today, it actually, you know, looks like it's even slightly less. There's our lava tube trace possibly right there again. Okay, so moving on, this photograph is from Andrew Hara, and this is a photograph of the Fissure 8 cone event. Yeah, so all the red you guys see is the actual baked rock, oxidized iron in the rock, and you can't quite see down into the hole to see anything red in this perspective right here. But the last image that we saw was just a tiny little pinprick of red that, you know, might have been a little push up, and then we haven't seen any photographs with lava ever since that one of our last update. So that combined with the fact that USGS put out their warning today, their downgrade from warning to watch today, to me implies that they've officially started the pause countdown clock as of today.
If such a thing exists.
Yeah.
The clock
is
partly imaginary. It's not like they actually have a clock with a month on it.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Our pause countdown clock,
Pause countdown. I mean, I agree with Philip that, you know, this is very meaningful that they reduce the alert level. And so if there is a clock, we're starting it. But they do this with the understanding that there's still a chance that it could start up without earthquakes one night. But the longer we stay paused, the more likely it is that it's actually over and is going to stay over. And this adjustment to lower the alert level is a big signal that we're on our way to considering this thing actually over. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks, John. So on this photograph, kind of moving on, a couple other things to kind of notice is you can see that there's a lot of collapse still happening within the cone. This big wedge of land right here that used to be higher up, there's a crack, so it used to be kind of a continuous slope going up from here. And that piece settled in there, and the same thing is happening on this side. There's pieces over there. All these things are kind of slumping. The whole cone is dropping in size, in fact, right? And let me find a picture that hopefully I got in here. Let me see if I do. It is not in there, but here, let's look at this one first. This is a comparison of a week ago, Fissure 8, to the one, to the image yesterday. So you guys can kind of see, even in a week, how much farther down the lava seems to have dropped and how much less active it seems a week on from when it did a week ago.
That's the red spot, right? Right there.
Yep, there it is, yeah.
Hard
right
to see in this photo there.
But there it is, yeah.
Lava.
Yep, so there's that, yeah. I'm not sure exactly how tall the Fissure 8 cone is anymore, but we will figure that out and look on the ESGIS report to see if we can find that. So let me just give me 1 second, you guys, and see if I can find the image I wanted to show you guys of the comparison of the cone. Okay, there it is. And so this is a compilation of images by Andrew Hara that are posted on Hawaii Tracker. So what you can see down here, this is July 12th, okay? July 26th, August 2nd, August 9th, and August 16th. So if I jump from that top one, August 16th, you can kind of notice, let's look at, for example, the height, the height from the top of the cone to the trees back here. And then we jump to the photograph we had of July 12th. You can see the shape of it's totally different. It's much pointier right there. Maybe it hasn't dropped a huge amount at the top, but the whole thing is kind of flatter and broader now. Maybe that's the way to describe the change as it appears to me. Right, so hard to say exactly how it is changing just like that. So yeah, there is that image right there. And let me go back to where I was, which was over here. So, all right, so there's our view of the Fissure 8, a little bit more, slightly more vertical view from Andrew Hara. And, here's like what we're talking about, the depth of the channel, for example, in a spillway, and then farther over here, and farther down is where that last image of the USGS that we showed you guys. And one more from Scott Wilson, showing the area of the bend, Pukapoho is now down here, right, the horseshoe shape. Fissure 8 is up there, right, a little bit of gas still coming out of it. And this is the whole flow channel looking crusted over and dead the entire way down. Except for this bottom part downhill from here off the image of the photograph where the middle of the jelly sandwich is still leaking out a little bit, where it's extra dribbly. So that is what we have for those particular photographs right there. And
do we want to go to tilt?
Now it seems like it's time to go to tilt. And that kind of is what we've been usually leading off with, but saving good stuff to the middle for you guys today. So here is our tilt plot today. Here we are looking at the summit first for the past 2 days, and maybe the first thing to look at once again is a scale. We're at 1.5 to -1, so we're starting at +1 and ending at -0.5. We have a net drop of -1.5 microradians for the whole 2 days, and kind of a general downhill trend with a little oscillation within it is what I've been choosing to call it. We're having some discussion whether these might possibly be deflation-inflation events, and it's just not really clear that they actually are. On a Pu'o'o scale, the scale is much less, 0.2 to minus 0.2, so the whole range of it is actually changing, like, you know, minus 1.5 or minus 0.2. It's barely even worth talking about, because other changes that are insignificant to magma may be contributing to that. So on my more preferred scale over here, looking at the past week and looking at 2.5 to minus 1.5, you can see the summit's going down. Actually, there's an interesting larger cycle happening here, like, you know, one wavelength oscillation, and then on top of it there's another one. I mentioned this a little bit yesterday or the day before, but it seems more obvious now that there's two oscillations, a larger oscillation up and down and a smaller one kind of embedded on top of it. And we're not quite sure what that means. I personally suspect a lot of this is gas driven. There's a lot of gas down in that area, and the way where the gas is actually forming and collecting must have been changing. The fact that the crater has gotten so much more deep over the last 3 months will have some knock-on effect. You know, one way to think of it is that we had a shallow magma chamber and a deep magma chamber before, and now we may well have lost a shallow one, and where it was is now open, exposed, you know, ground, maybe the top of it, that area at the very top of it. So now that bottom, the chamber that was the deeper one, has now become the shallow chamber, and it's one way of looking at it. Maybe not quite as shallow as before, but it's the one that's closest to the surface now. So, you know, it could be that what was happening in shallow chamber may now kind of propagate down to that lower chamber in some degree, or the conduit above it. And that, without knowing exactly what that means, you know, will likely affect how the gases are forming and where they're collecting and stored and all of that. And that's kind of, you know, why, without understanding exactly how it might actually happen, I suspect, first of all, the most likely culprit is the gas of moving. This is why I keep saying I'd like to see at least 5 or 10 microradians of inflation, which to me is a signal that is too large for gas, and then definitely magma. So that's why I'm looking for that. Until I see that, then I'm still looking for the magma. Right? So the big picture is still essentially this kind of big flat line. You kind of see a little bit of a slight oscillation in there, tiny 1 pixel up, 1 pixel down, and that, but, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not nearly as relevant as anything else, right? That's happening here. So let's look at our GPS as well, because it's got some interesting things. Looking at the South Caldera vertical, we don't see a whole lot. We see some interesting, like, there's some interesting little spots right here, you know, like looks like the instrument was actually moving possibly, or who knows if that was some calibration or work on it. And that's like one, maybe by itself not enough. This is kind of curious right there. When we look at the lower plots down here, we see, okay, well, maybe that wasn't something really, you know, a slight little bump here, but really over here, there's a real signal which is embedded in here. It appears to be a real signal to me, at least, because it lasts about 24 hours or so, right? And it wasn't like someone walking by, like something actually changed over the course of 24 hours back and forth. The crucial thing is it went back to where it started, right? There's essentially a flat line between both sides of here. But over 24 hours, this thing dropped and rose and dropped and rose, and it's actually, the drop from up here to down here is about 1 meter, actually. So that's a huge amount of distance for the ground to be moving up and down. And that kind of reminds me of something like a steam kettle or like a pressure cooker or whatever, like something where like the top can kind of flap open and release some steam and then like go back to where it was before, steam or gas or something along those lines, you know. But that's just totally a shot in the dark of what something like that might actually be. It kind of, to me, shows that the blocks of ground are definitely mobile. They're wiggly, right? But they seem to be settling back in the original place regardless of what kind of wiggling they're doing. Here's another example of that thing on a different component on a Kahuna station instead of the Byron's Ledge component right there.
It's an interesting thing. It's hard to say, to explain, but, you know, just notice that it's over a long amount of time, like Philip was saying. So it's not like if you were standing there, you would see it or feel it move. But our instruments have recorded that it did move up and down, but for some reason came back to the original position. So some kind of little bump in the system is really interesting, but it's pretty significant. That's like 1 meter, did we figure out? 1 meter of movement?
That's what I figured, yeah. If we're looking at this lower one down here, for example, at Kahuna, which we know there's, I don't think I've showed recently, but a video of the crack moving over by the Jagger Museum during a collapse event. We know that we've seen how wiggly that piece of ground actually is. There's, visual evidence better than any other spot nor ever. And you actually can see how that thing moves. Video. But, just down here is 0, and this up here is 1 meter, right? So, there's a clear 1 meter shaking or moving kind of thing in that area. So that's interesting as well. Looking at the long-term summit GPS, we can kind of see what we expected to see, as we pointed out last week. We should, if the thing stays inactive, then basically we should see that flat line emerging, and there is our flat line right there. And you can't really see it in the 5-year scale quite yet. This is basically that plot, kind of all this whole area scrunched into this last little bit from here, and then what was happening the 4 years before that, which was just a kind of a gradual rise, on the scale, this is actually from up here, it's about, well, not quite half a meter and a little below, so maybe a half meter total actual increase over that 4-year period before we had the massive events of this year that came and followed after that. There's Pu'o'o. That hasn't really changed a whole lot. If anything, it maybe has slightly flattened out, but I'm not really confident in saying that. There's not enough change in the slope right there to really say anything conclusive about that. But so that's kind of what we're seeing. We have as well, should I pull up the plot of the Kīlauea one as well while we're at it, or is it too complicated? Am I complicating the issue too much?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just one more GPS plot for you guys. This one is from the Kīlauea Puna station code JOKA, and this is a year-long plot. So September all the way up till here we are, May 2018 is when our event actually happens, and so this is the part that we're actually interested in, is right here. The cleanest, there's a little bit of noise on this component, the up component, and the east component up here as well, but the clearest one to see is the north component. You can kind of see that it had the eruption event right here where it dropped a huge amount, kind of bounced up, then dropped down, and then it's been kind of moving, still dropping, contracting essentially, right? And then now kind of finding some more stable flat spot at the very, very end right here, right? So that's something we'll be looking for more as well, along the lines of what we showed you guys on the GPS for the summit. So all those things together kind of support the ideas we've been talking about. We don't see any reason to change our outlook at this point. Everything just looks like it's still winding down. There's no signal of magma coming in anywhere. If it is coming in, we don't know where it's going, but wherever it's going, it's not expressing as inflation and GPS movement or seismicity or anything like that. So not to say that it can't be happening, but if it is happening, we don't see it. And that's the best we can say, is that we don't see it with the instruments that we have.
We don't see it. But can we go back to the other plot, the other tilt meter one?
Sure.
So on these ones, like Phil's saying, if there's magma moving into the system, say at the blue line, the summit, we should see on this sort of scale it moving up consistently. And it won't be a mystery to us when that sort of thing happens. We'll either see maybe the summit is going to begin reinflating one day. When it happens, it won't look like this tiny level of change. It'll be something we can see at this scale and be consistent. And so we expect that there would be that kind of process before anything reactivates. However, the geologists put in their report, they can't rule out that at this point there's still a chance that it could just start flowing out of Fissure 8 again without earthquakes, without a lot of precursor warning. And so we're still kind of in that limbo stage, but based on this data, there's nothing to indicate that that's fixing to happen at this time. So I'm just trying to balance the two schools of thought right there.
Right. We have more to talk about as far as the signals here. No, not so much.
Not so much.
Okay, so what I wanted to do is kind of recap a discussion that we had on Hawaii Tracker about the 55, not the 55, the Mauna Ulu 71 eruption that had a 3.5-month pause, which is being referred to by the USGS as the longest pause.
Can I bother you for the time, please?
It is
1 o'clock.
10 o'clock?
1.
Oh, 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, yeah.
I was having so much fun. I'm down the
So the thing that's been kind of holding back, a lot of the conclusion or announcement of this thing being winding down or over is the fact that there are pauses in the system, right? And USGS has pointed out, two in particular, they pointed out the 55 eruption had a 5-day and a 16-day pause, they've been saying. And they've also pointed out that the 1971 eruption, 71 to 72, there was a 3.5-month pause. And right, that 3.5-month pause is the one that I want to kind of focus on as the important thing to look at. what was happening at that point and what signs there were that kind of indicated there was going to be something different happening, what kind of forced the pause, what forced the eruption to begin again afterwards, and then compare that to what we have going on right now. So let's switch the camera around and show you guys the tilt for the Mauna Ulu eruption. So Mauna Ulu was actually about a 5-year eruption from 69 to 74, but there was this gap from 71 to 72 that actually interrupted the thing. So let's kind of talk you through it here. On the very bottom is the year, right? Each tick is actually a month in this case. So eruption begins, I want to say it was May 69. Then we have 70, 71 continuous, and 72, 73, 74 all the way through here. We basically have 2 tilt lines, you know, this is one here and another one here. Let's focus on one and kind of keep it simple. And they basically have outlined, kind of drawn a red shaded area around the bounds, right? So the entire tilt wiggles all fit in within that phase. So this is a long, kind of the big picture trend of the tilt, right, over time. So you can kind of see that we don't really see what was happening before 69, or before the eruption actually began, but as the eruption progressed, it had a lot of this kind of sawtooth appearance to it. I'm going to zoom in here a little more for you guys. It kind of shows, like, you know, an inflation, deflation, inflation, you know, like, and probably because we actually had high fountaining at the time, right? So we actually had pressure building, then a fountain released the pressure, then pressure building, and then a fountain released the pressure, then pressure building. And I believe there might have been 12 of those in Mauna Ulu before, so probably this first range right in here, maybe this might be the last one right there. It's hard to say exactly, before we kind of switched to having a more effusive lava lake kind of situation. And so you see, you know, not quite the same pattern, but, you know, similar up and down of the tilt as you might expect, you know, of a long-term eruption, right? Remember, this thing lasted years, right? I should have mentioned this earlier, but here's our tilt scale on the left. There's 0, 50, 100, 150, 200. This is a big scale that we've been working with and dealing with, right? So the little wiggles we're talking about that we see today don't even appear in this kind of plot. Just kind of reemphasize that. Okay, so the period of interest was actually, I'm kind of zoom out a little bit here, was actually in 1971. So actually, the eruption at Mauna Ulu was still going when in August 14, 71, there was an eruption at the summit, and another one happened 6 weeks later in September 1971. And this was summit and the Southwest Rift. The Southwest Rift was much more involved in Mauna Ulu eruption and Pu'u in the beginning, in fact, than our eruption. So that's something to revisit at some later broadcast. But you know, we'll kind of skip over it for now, and just say that there were clear fissures erupting at the summit of the volcano while Mauna Ulu was still erupting. And after those happened, then Mauna Ulu paused. This line over here to end of stage 4. That's the end of that first half of the eruption of Mauna Ulu that begins here. And then over here, this line of 72 is when it began again, right in there. So in this middle time, you could easily speculate that the magma had found a path to the surface and probably released some of the pressure, you know, coming from the summit. That itself may have caused some disruption to the path of magma from the summit to Mauna Ulu, because it clearly found an easier way out through the summit rather than going to Mauna Ulu instead. And then once the eruption actually ended, then we still had that situation of the path Mauna Ulu wasn't open, but the magma was still coming in. So what we see is inflation. We kind of try to microanalyze it. Here's the actual end of the eruption of stage 4 was somewhere right in here. And maybe you could say, okay, well, there might have been possibly 2 weeks of not a whole lot of up and down deformation if you look at it in super fine, try to like make it fit. But then clearly, after those 2 weeks, we see like a clear rising signal, right? It's just going to give you guys a scale. Up here, this is, I'm going to reading from the side, it might be 120 microradians. And down here, this might be an order of 60 microradians. So we're talking about a 60 microradian gain in those 3.5 months, right? 60. Okay, that's why I'm saying I'd like to see at least 5 as a start, as a reasonable starting point of like, okay, if I see 5, maybe we're actually climbing enough to get there. So that's the story of the pause, of the 3.5 month pause in 1971, and actually February 1972 it began again, and you can kind of see the inflation stopped, resume this path through the system, and then we have more of that, what they're calling a quasi-steady state regime, you know, still some inflation happening, slight trend going up, you know, but more or less much more stable, and because it's erupting out of Mauna Ulu now instead of just building underground without it coming out, than we had in a 3.5 month pause. So based on this, I personally don't really think that 3.5 month pause scenario applies to us at all. because we did not have any summit activity that disrupted what was happening here as far as like a new fissure coming out. We had the collapses. That's hugely disruptive on its own. And like that on its own is what which is the kind of equivalent of what happened here of the summit kind of blocking off the path to the rift zone possibly. And if magma is still coming in, we should see this signal right here, this inflation pattern. And that's why we are so, kind of growing in confidence every day that goes by without inflation, right? Because how are we gonna get to 60? We just keep passing days and days and days without growing at all. How are we gonna get to 60? It's gonna take a lot longer for that to happen.
Well, yeah, so can you hear me?
So let's turn this around just
in case you can't hear me. So, yeah, I mean, I agree that probably that 3-month pause is not similar to what we've been through or what we're experiencing now, especially since we're not seeing the inflation. And so inflation is something we'd expect if we're gearing up more pressure to having more eruption later, and we're not seeing that. But I also think USGS is only pointing out the 3.5-month pause to give people a frame of reference for how long some of these pauses can be.
Absolutely.
And even though geophysically it's not necessarily the situation, so they're just trying to I think they're trying to defend their assessment that, it could be anywhere from a few days to 3.5 months. Here's an example. But we can tell by looking at the data from history, it wasn't a similar situation. It was kind of different context. And so, but the time frame is meaningful. And for this eruption, the thing that is making it tricky is they say, repeatedly in their remarks with their update that we can't rule out the idea of collapses continuing at the summit or Fissure 8 turning back on. There might be a resumption of the same thing we were seeing. We don't know why it's stopped and flatlined exactly. And so they have, at least on the one hand, the possibility that it'll just continue doing what it was doing before. And they can't rule it out. But, we contrast that with what Phil is helping describe is when we illustrate the history of these pauses, in most cases, when the pause is happening, there's pressure building somewhere. And we're not seeing that here today, which is a hopeful signal that it's not about to reactivate. It's just that in the other school of thought, they can't rule out with the system the way it is now, it could just start up again. The longer we have this pause, the less and less likely that theory is. And so that's the impasse we're kind of at right now.
Yeah, and just to reemphasize what John said, like there were pauses at Pu'o'o that were at least 2 months long as well. And those ones did not have any summit blockage at all. It's probably a blockage at Pu'o'o itself, but likewise, we also saw changes in inflation in those kind of signals as well. So I believe that John is absolutely right that EOS is putting that out there, not just to kind of illustrate the range of it, but also to educate us, because we are all now living on a volcanic island, very much aware of it. And when something like this happens again, expecting a 3-month pause is not out of the question. I just don't think this is what we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
That's basically it, So along those lines of kind of keeping to educate you guys, like what this might look like if something like this were to happen, if it were to reactivate a situation like, besides having inflation, I wanted to read you guys a little bit of the description of how they describe this eruption actually resumed. Just a couple of sentences here, but they say that here's what it says of the rebirth of the Mauna Ulu lava lake from this published article of the Volcanoes in Hawaii Compendium. Tell you guys if you guys really want the reference, I can show it to you guys. But anyways, so it says the rebirth of the Mauna Ulu lava lake. The start of the 1972 to 74 eruption was preceded by several months of net and summit inflation and of increased seismicity from shallow sources at the summit and upper East Rift. About 1 dozen.
The eruption's over. Don't listen to them.
This is how I'm proving that it's over, right? Because before the eruption resumed in 72, about 1 dozen earthquakes of magnitude 2.5 were felt by local residents between midnight and 2 a.m. So in 2 hours, 1 dozen 2.5s at the summit between the caldera and Kanekakoi. On January 21st, this was almost 2 full weeks before the lava came back out of Mauna Ulu. Right. So not only was there the inflation, we actually had a
whole lot of warning signs.
We had 2 weeks advance that something had broken that was blocking the summit from the rift zone, was how I'd interpret it. which then that's about how long things might take to push their way back through, about a couple weeks, to reestablish the conduit, re-intrude, re-inflate, build enough pressure to actually come out of the ground. On a morning of February 2nd, I believe, is how I interpret the account here. So there, that's why we keep saying we would expect to see signals, we expect to see the tilt increasing, we expect to see maybe not continuous earthquakes, but at some point some earthquakes, and so when we have more earthquakes at the summit, we'll have to figure out whether those are earthquakes from nothing collapsing more, of some pathway getting unblocked, some pathway staying blocked, whatever else. The summit's not as simple because of all, it's the, like the center of that spider web, so to speak, and the strands can go almost any direction because of that. It's kind of the center there. We don't know if lava is going to Hale Mau Mau. The USGS assumes that it does so on a continuous, what's the word? It just continuously comes into the summit. However, when we look at eruptions like Mauna Ulu or like Pu'o'o or this one here, we do see them describing, big increases in the amount of lava coming to the system. So they both believe in like a steady source background stream and in bigger pulses coming through at the same time. And that just leads me to believe that that more continuous rate could also vary to some degree. Even if it's still coming up, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, maybe all the way stop potentially, temporarily as it kind of fills spaces farther down. If I'm describing maybe the gas nucleation area, dropping farther down into the ground, then that creates more space down there actually as well, right? So that there could be it could be fairly complicated how all that fits together. But that's why I wanted to kind of bring up this particular case study of the 3.5-month eruption. The other ones of 5. I'm sorry, the 3.5-month pause. Thank you. Pause during the Mauna Ulu eruption in 1971 to 72. And kind of illustrate what that might actually look like, right? And the scale of inflation we would look for, right? 60 microradians over those 3 months, right? That's what, 20 a month? Okay, so that's 5 a week. So that's why I'm saying we need to see something in that order, then it's going to sustain itself and kind of going on from there.
Yeah, I think just like you said, if we get signals, it'll be pretty unmistakable that it's inflating. It's not going to be a little wiggly half a microradian. It's going to be clear if that happens. And in all likelihood, most events give a lot of warning when they happen. So we can expect, those signals. We can expect that there'll be warning and time to react. It's just, erring on the side of caution. USGS still can't rule out the alternative, that maybe it'll just start up without warning. And that's again the thing. But in all likelihood, there's usually always these signals of inflation. There's usually always increase in earthquakes. And so that should help reduce the anxiety about the kind of state that we're in right now while we wait for the official agencies to make it a more... the death certificate, that's what we're looking for. We're waiting for them to sign the death certificate on the eruption, and this is why they hesitate about it. So anyway, it's over.
Yeah, Kavi, we got Kavi here with us. You want to add anything besides it's over, Kavi?
It's over. When do we get to go home? Damage. When can we go home? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of how people feel.
That's how we started the broadcast.
Yeah, so maybe that's how we should end it as well. And we will keep an eye on the signals for you guys and let you know if something changes dramatically. We'll share that with you guys for sure. Otherwise, I'm going to try to see if I can track down Ikeika at some point today and get him to say something about this. Do you want to say anything about... Oh, we talked about the meeting last night already in some detail. So maybe we'll leave it at that until... Because there's more park meetings happening today, I believe. So there's one happening, I'm not sure what time today, in Pahala. So if anyone is in the Pahala area, you guys can check out the Volcano Talk story. Is today there. I can actually find out for you guys. So give me a second to look it up. I can actually find...
And I have a tour soon, so I have to get going. But
yeah, so
my tour, we can't do our... I normally work doing eco tours in the national park for a nonprofit, the Friends, that supports the national park with the money we make. But of course, we can't be in the park right now, so we have to get creative. So I'll be doing waterfalls and things, and it all relates to like how will we one day be able to see Lower Puna? for visitors or for residents. Yeah. So, but anyway, did you find the?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So yeah, the meeting in Pahala tonight is at 5 p.m. at the Pahala Plantation. And then there is another one at the Volcano Arts Center on Tuesday at 1 p.m. right after lunch, middle of the day. And then next week, Thursday the 23rd at Kahuku Unit at 10 a.m., which is the only part of the park that's actually open. So we will talk more about what went down with the national park, but what I'm trying to say is that this is going to be like a week-long conversation we're going to have with you guys. So maybe we'll keep adding that stuff, not right now since John's going to take off, but we'll do more of it when we cover the meeting in Pahala, for example, or the one in Volcano, or onwards and onwards with that. So there's plenty about that we'll still share with you guys, but we're going to pace ourselves a little bit here. And yeah, so someone wants to know about the tours with John. John is giving tours through the Friends of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park,
Yep.
FHVNP. So you guys are still willing to look at their website and...
Yeah, even with the park being closed, the Friends' mission is to support the park. We do all kinds of things, fundraisers, outreach, education, and so you can still book tours through the Friends. We got a lot of really knowledgeable guides, and it's a nonprofit, so we're married to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park in that the funds we raise always go into park programs, and they really need that right now because they're trying to figure out how to open the park, how to make visitor experiences again. So you can support the Friends. We're still open. So there's that commercial.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean that's crucial that the park, the park doesn't get enough funds from Congress to operate everything that needs to happen in a park. So they often have these nonprofit private partnerships, and that's what the Friends really is. And so they're hugely important. Any funding that goes to them essentially goes to the national park also, but doesn't get funneled through Congress, is the way I think of it. Yeah. And that's hugely, hugely useful. You can imagine to not have to have money tied to Congress.
And you can ask for John. Ask for John.
Yeah, you guys can actually get John more work. Ask for him in particular.
That would be great.
Yeah. So there. That is our update for our midday today. John and myself, and maybe we'll have another one to kick up farther on. And I do know that there is a media tour happening right now up in the summit of the national park that Ken Boyer is on, representing Hawaii Tracker. So you guys at some point will look for some images from him on Hawaii Tracker, which should be some images of the summit, what's happening up there, all the road cracks, all that. Which is also ties into the whole park theme as well. So we have plenty of park talk coming up soon, you guys, I promise. But we're gonna cut it off for now and sign off as usual with
Stay classy.
Stay classy, Puna. Aloha.
Aloha.